50% of Australians want immigration reduced. Let's have a look. Hello everyone, Florian.heise here, and welcome to another episode of HeiseSays. Grab your stein of coffee and let's have a look at this article from news.com.au, written by Melissa Ira, discussing, well, a recent survey that shows half of Australians want immigration reduced and 70% thinks we don't need to become big Australia. We don't need the big population growth. So residents have roundly rejected the idea of a big Australia, with a new survey revealing what we really think about population growth. More than 70% of voters say Australia does not need more people, and half want immigration reduced, a pre-pandemic national survey reveals. The findings are based on the Australian Population Research Institute, their annual survey taken on in October and November 2019. The survey of voters' attitudes to population growth found 72% said Australia did not need more people. Half of the respondents also said immigration was too high and should be reduced. What do you think, everyone? Let us know your opinions in the comments down below while I have a shot of my coffee. It's good coffee. This is a key finding since it shows there is only lukewarm support for the core Big Australia strategy of high immigration. Well, have they surveyed real estate agents, property council people? Remember, we've seen there were articles coming from the property council calling for increased immigration to bring more people over to prop up the property sector. Here's a question they should have asked in the survey, and I don't think they did. I bet you they didn't. Would you, how much of a property decrease would you accept until you are advocating for more immigration? 10%? 20%? 50%? The TAPRI academics, Catherine Betts and Bob Burrell, said in their research report released this month. This is especially true of non-graduates, 53%, who think it is too high. We can say with confidence, based on our and other surveys, that half the electorate are prepared to say within the safety of an anonymous survey that immigration should be reduced. Notice how it's with an anonymous survey. Because people don't want to, be on the wrong side of history, or don't want to dare be considered, inappropriate or politically, ideologically on the bad side, the bad guys. The study authors said most voters blamed high immigration for a deterioration of the quality of life in Australia's big cities, as well as stress on its natural environment. Moreover, at least half the electorate do not support the progressive cultural values that left elites, including Labor leaders, regard as legitimating high immigration. Nor do they support the economic argument advanced to justify it, they said. Most of the voters who take this stance are not university graduates. On the other hand, most graduate voters support progressive values, and a significant minority of them say that immigration should be increased further. But even more of them, this is interesting, and I will look at the data, we'll look at the research paper, more graduates say that immigration should be reduced than graduates that say immigration shouldn't be reduced. Not mentioned here. Notice how it's framed. Dr. Betts and Dr. Burrell say that despite Australian government pursuing a high immigration policy for almost 20 years, it's surprising there's been no serious political challenge to a big Australia. This is remarkable because over the same 2 decades, immigration has become a huge public issue elsewhere, with major political consequences in the UK and the US, they said. Well, we don't have the wonderful experiences like they're having in London quite yet. As Sadiq Khan would say, the just natural things of living in a modern metropolitan city. They're starting to materialize here in Australia, but not as much as in other cities. I think in some ways we're quite fortunate. But they predict it's unlikely to continue in a post-pandemic environment. At least half the electorate is concerned about the effects of rapid immigration, fueled population growth on their quality of life, they said. The conditions that made it possible to sustain a big Australia and ignore this concern no longer exist in the post-pandemic environment. The stock of voters at risk in a labour market deep in a pandemic-induced recession is large. So is the number of those fearful of the health consequences of further high immigration and potentially deeply resentful of actions that would mock the sacrifices they have made. Well, we're going to see more and more. Here's the thing. Immigration is an important part of our property bubble, guys. And it's an important part, a huge part of our university education sector. These are two big parts of our economy. How can we keep the bubble going if there's no political will? The authors said any attempt by the major political parties to revive a big Australia would be challenged by voters, prompting immigration to become a bigger issue than it was in the pre-pandemic issues. So let's jump here to the research paper, and we can see here I brought this up. So, attitudes to immigration by education. And this is the question in the survey. Do you think the number of immigrants allowed into Australia nowadays should be reduced or increased? So, increased a lot or a little. Now, the total of that is 20%. Of that, 27% are graduates and 18% are non-graduates. So, you can see that. But then have a look here. How they were saying that a significant minority, a majority of graduates are advocating for an increasing of immigration. But 40% of graduates say it needs to be reduced a lot or a little. And most of those are saying it needs to be reduced a lot as opposed to a little. You've got more people saying, graduates saying it should remain the same than those who say it should increase. So it's interesting to see what the author of that article tended to pick out. She was trying to create a big divide. Because here we go. Look at the number of people that say it needs to be reduced a lot or a little. That's 40% of graduates and 53% of non-graduates. So there's a huge chunk of both groups. So it's almost like your level of education is not making that big a difference anymore in people's attitudes towards immigration. So maybe some of the older, outdated stereotypes, they're taking my jobs, as in South Park, are not as valuable anymore. Here's another question. The attitudes to population growth by education. So do you think Australia needs more people? Graduates, 42% say yes, 58% say no. Non-graduates, 24% say yes, 76% say no. Because also you've got to understand that there's more chance that the people in the non-graduate sector are going to suffer the economic consequences of increased immigration, particularly if the immigrants are coming at a lower skill level. Well, which I would say isn't happening. I'd say a big chunk of them are coming at the graduate level too, to be honest, and are putting increased competition for university graduates. But we're all suffering it because of the housing bubble that we have. Now, as we can see here, I'll just bring up just this little chart that I may show once or twice. Look at that increase in housing. And a big portion to that is due to population growth and immigration. Sydney and Melbourne are going to take a big hit. So that's the thing. That's one argument I put forward that we might see, is that they're going to look to prop up the property sector by calling for more immigration. Now, as we can see here, there's no political will really to make it happen. Table 3, attitudes to immigrants by attitudes to population growth. Do you think the number of immigrants allowed into Australia nowadays should be reduced or increased? And do you think Australia needs more people? So the people who said, yes, we need more people, they are also the significant number that say we need to increase immigration. 11% say no. Reduced, those who think we need more people have said 12% and 65% say no. So if we go down here are some of the reasons people give for preferring lower levels of immigration. How do you feel about these reasons? Okay, 1, or this question here, question 12. Our cities are too crowded already, and there is too much traffic. 71% agree strongly. It increases the cost of housing for everyone. 58% say that. I thought that would be a bigger one, to be honest. Bringing in more immigrants keeps wages down. 37% say that. The natural environment is under stress with the number of people we already have, at 65%. We may not have enough water for more people, 64%. Oh, so that's an issue. I've done a video on this about our potable water. I will try and find it so I can refer to it here on my channel. I've looked at this, just the potable water as a ratio to our population, because our GDP hasn't increased, but neither has our potable water, guys, and it's quite drastic. Go potable water. There you go. You know, Australia's birth rate blunder. And you can find it in here. Well, New South Wales Dam construction, Sherwood. Do I have it in here? Can you find it? There we go. Australia's population growth outstrips our water supply. Check that one out, and you'll be surprised. Little concerned. But at least it's good it's getting attention here. So, a larger population could make it harder for Australians to reduce total greenhouse gas emissions at 61%. I mean, okay. I know people are worried about it. I had one person making the argument about per capita. You know, if anything, if we're measuring our greenhouse gas emissions on a per capita basis like China does, increasing our population will actually reduce that number, because the immigrants will the more people we have, the greenhouse gases they create will help reduce the our per capita hit because of all of the exports that we're sending offshore, all of the coal. So we need to, it shows you how BS a lot of this way of measuring stuff is, and how some people actually have it backwards. So what else do we have here? Attitudes to claim that immigration fueled population growth boosts economic growth, strengthens defense, and ameliorates aging by attitudes to immigration. Okay, so question 5. We need to continually increase the population for economic growth. So immigration should be increased a lot, a little, or increased a lot or a little, remain the same or reduced. So strongly agree. So 70% strongly agree with that, who's arguing it should be increased. They neither disagree or disagree. We'll just look at the totals. 30% strongly agree. 28% neither agree or disagree. And 42% disagree or disagree strongly. A large population makes it easier to defend Australia. Only 22% agree with that. 47% disagree. Having more migrants will offset the aging population. Only 29% agree and 43% disagree. We just need to increase our birth rate here, guys. Have more kids. We need more people to increase our cultural diversity by attitudes to immigration. Okay. Why do we need to increase our cultural diversity? The thing is, once you read a bit of history, or when you work with people from these different cultures, you'll find sometimes they completely want to isolate. I noticed that with one guy. We're looking at doing a project with him, and it was quite a culture shock, actually, because I brought Rachel for the interview, and he was a conservative Muslim, so he made her sit in the corner. She didn't quite know how to take that, because she's a registered architect. This is right back when we were starting. And he wanted to make some whole enclave and only for his community and his people. And I learned out a bit later that the guy was a bit of a nutter, to be honest. Poor guy, he'd had like a stroke and he was going off he couldn't do the maths. He couldn't do he had no idea of how much these things would cost. But there's a concern with that if you have immigration coming over, how long does it take for them to adopt the dominant culture of the nation that they're migrating to? My father, he immigrated over. He didn't know any English. He learned English on the boat coming over here. He got a job. I think he came over when it was a holiday period and he was shocked that everything was closed. He wasn't used to it. And he managed to get a job. He worked for the concrete housing project in Victoria for many years, and he worked his way up there, and he did quite well. There were some people that were, let's say, weren't too happy about a German immigrant getting promoted and getting jobs, but he didn't care. So he did quite well. And what do we got here? So we need more people to increase diversity. Increase a lot or a little. 70% of them say. So people who are saying immigration should increase a lot or a little think we need to do it for diversity. So reduce a lot or a little. 71% completely disagree with it, or remain about the same. Most of them, for the majority, are neither agree nor disagree. Attitudes to cultural diversity with regards to attitudes to immigration. So, some people say that today Australia is in danger of losing its culture and identity. Do you agree? Now, could you even have these questions if people had to give up their identity? As in, if it wasn't an anonymous survey. So, immigration should be increased or decreased. So, those who say immigration should be decreased, 44% of them agree with this statement. So they're arguing for increased immigration, and they're saying that it's going to lose its cultural identity. 11% of them are saying Australia never had a distinctive culture and identity. So those who say it's about the same, most of them disagree, but pretty much they're fence-sitters. Reduced a lot or a little. So those who are calling for it to reduce, and remember, 40% of them are graduates, and a big chunk of them, most of them, are non-graduates, like over 50%. 71% say that Australia is in danger of losing its culture and identity. So that would be the majority of respondents. All boats carrying asylum seekers should be turned back by attitudes to immigration. I can't see people answering this question if it wasn't anonymous. So, those who think it should be increased, a little or a lot, agree with it. 40%. Wow. 41% disagree. Those who are saying it should be reduced a little or a lot, they agree with that statement. 79%. Remain the same. 35% agree with it. So, it's racist to cut immigration. Okay, so it's racist to cut immigration. I mean, that's just... Immigration hasn't anything to do with a race. You get people immigrating from all over the world. If you cut immigration, you're cutting people from every race. But that's too subtle understanding of these issues, is it? So, those who say increase it a lot. Okay, so 49% of people who are calling for increased immigration to Australia think it's racist to cut immigration. There you go. That's all you need to really know there. And 88% say who needs to be reduced a little or a lot say it's not racist. What are you talking about? So, I mean, that just shows you right there. Look at that difference, guys. And even those who say it should remain the same, most of them say they disagree with that statement. What else do we have in there? Any more questions answered? We'll keep scrolling down. Here we go. So immigration should be by age group. Reduced a little or a lot. Increased a little or a lot. So you can see there, look, you've got the older you get, the more lived experience you actually have and the greater understanding of reality that you possess. Would that be a fair argument? And, you know, your brain hasn't really matured until about here, hasn't it? Funny that. So that's interesting. I can't say there's any surprises there. The young people, you know, it's pretty much average now. And, you know, you're hitting about 40. So here, it's starting to, well, the difference is quite stark, isn't it? Many more people think it's reduced a little or a lot. This is why you've got all the leftists calling for the voting age to be brought down even further when physical developments of people's brains haven't even gone close to being at a point where it's finished. But that's biology, you know. Biology isn't real. It's all subjective. Okay. Immigration should be by age group, graduates only. So again, you're seeing here, so increase the little or a lot. And so then, okay, reality hits. So a few years after graduation, it starts to nosedive. They start to maybe work. There you have it. Look at that. What else do we have here? Immigrants should be by country of birth. Increase the little or a lot. So Australians, 51% of people born in Australia should be. Overseas, the majority of them as well, say that immigration should be reduced. Those born in the ESB should be. Europe, Asia, okay, remain about the same. So the Asians are the only group that are not saying it should be reduced. Other, reduced, and total, reduced. So voting intention by country of birth. So Australians, the majority are voting for the coalition. And then you've got Labor, then other, then the Greens. So you can see why Labor is in bed with the Greens. Can't you? You can definitely see why here, because they need to. They need to be. And remember who opened the door to all of this. You know, which political party. You know, I'll give you a hint, the same politician that thinks you're too dumb to manage your own money, so it forces a portion of it to be quarantined until you're retired. So overseas we can see ESB, there you go. Europe, dead heat. Left, Labor, and then a whole lot of others. Asia, much higher for the Conservatives. Other, slightly higher for Labor, and then the total. There we have it. So, What do we have here? Votes for parties of the right and left by education status. Okay, so graduates in each sample as a percentage. Non-graduates voting coalition or other, that was 60% in 66. Graduates voting coalition or other was 76. And then graduates voting Labour or Greens from 96 on was 44. And then graduates. So you can see most graduates and non-graduates were voting for the coalition in 66. 2019, only 55 non-graduates were voting for the coalition. And 47% of graduates were voting for the coalition. Non-graduates was that. And here you've got Labour and Greens up to 45 and graduates up to 53. So you can see here all the huge increase of graduates voting for Labour. Look at that huge change there. That's the most drastic one. And they've tanked for the coalition. So a lot of graduates have jumped over to Labour. So Labour, which used to be quite working class, certainly isn't anymore. It shows you why they've got they're appealing to these inner city voters and are abandoning their working class. Why they're talking against coal. Traditionally, the mining industries would be a big portion of their base. They've cast them aside. It's why we can understand now why Labour have all these crazy policies. Why they believe in the wage gap and all this other rubbish, because they're appealing to that vote because they need the Greens. This is the Overton window just shifting. We can see here, this is the Overton window shifting further and further to the left. So voting for parties of the right, coalition and other by education status. So non-graduates and graduates. So you can see it's pretty much the same. And the number of graduates in the sample steadily increased. Voting for Labour and the Greens, same thing. Slightly higher. Anything else here that's interesting? Attitudes to immigration by political party. So coalition voters, it's gone too far, or gone much too far or too far. 51%, the candidates 31%. Labour voters were only 38% and only 2%. There you go. Look at that disparity there. Labour's not representing their base. Even the coalition is a big jump. Greens, there you go. Some Green people think it's gone too far. Well, that'd be the environmentalists, wouldn't it? What else do we have? So I will link to this report if you want to go through the whole thing by yourself. And do you support or oppose this idea of Australia first hiring by age and intended voter? Oh, okay, this is interesting. So what do we have here? Strongly support. So 67% strongly support it. The coalition strongly supports it. Even Labour is over 60%. Even the Greens is 50%. So an opposed is, most people strongly support it across all age groups, really, it looks like, and political preferences. So let's just look at the conclusion. Australian governments have pursued a high immigration policy for nearly 20 years and have done this immune from electoral challenge. In so doing, they've become an outlier in the Western world. This is unlikely to continue. At least half the electorate is concerned about the effects of rapid immigration-fueled population growth on their quality of life. And as I've looked at it in previous episodes, our GDP has continued to grow, but the growth per capita is going down. We've been below trend since the GFC, guys. The conditions that made it possible to sustain a big Australia and ignore this concern no longer exist in the post-COVID environment. The stock of voters at risk in a labour market deep in a COVID-induced recession is large. So is the number of those fearful of the health consequences of further high immigration and potentially deeply resentful of actions that would mock the sacrifices they have made. And I mean, that's right. If the coalition or Labour does try to revive a big Australia, many of these voters would respond readily to any attempt to mobilise them. In such circumstances, immigration would become a public issue, far more salient to the electorate than was the case before the virus. If this should happen, it is likely the numbers would have to moderate, as they have done in the UK, US and much of Western Europe. And we're seeing Europe is suffering the consequences from this from the insane number of amount of population displacement going into Europe now. Just look at France as an example right now, guys. So here we have it. Quite interesting research paper and some very interesting results. What do you think, everyone? Where do you sit with regards to this? Let us know in the comments down below. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. If you're a fan and want to support the content I create here, there are a few ways you can. You can join us on YouTube or Patreon. You can support us using our affiliate links at Amazon, eBay, Independent Reserve, or Kucoin. You can buy merch from HeiseSays, use Gold Pass from the Perth Mint, or support us via PayPal. Take care, everyone. Have a great day, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.